Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Monday, June the 27th, 2016. And I have my dear friend and good colleague, Mr. Louis Cammarosano from smallgold.com, and that's SMAULGLD.com, on the line. And we're going to get you guys caught up on the gold and silver market. And thank you all for being here.
I've been looking at the stories in the UK and the US, and almost all of them talk about the despair and the gloom and how the people are feeling devastated. And when you look at, there's no mention of any celebrations or jubilation or people celebrating their sovereignty. There's none of that. It's all about how everyone, they try to capture it as everyone is upset about this. And what I was saying about, if you look at the vote, it wasn't just 52 to 48% in Great Britain. If you strip out Scotland and you strip out Northern Ireland, who voted overwhelmingly to remain, you're talking about 65 to 65% of the people in the rest of England that voted to leave. And they're not feeling despair. And it's interesting that you have all of these people who normally are anti-banks are complaining now that the banks are in trouble because they voted to leave.
We love our enslavers. We love the guards at our door.
Well, they're the ones who complain about the banks too, and they seem to be concerned now that there's going to be a hit to the banks. Oh, okay,
good.
I thought you liked that kind of thing. Exactly.
Good. I hope they all go belly up. Because as I was listening to Gerald Celente earlier over on King World News, and he was saying, what about capitalism? What about that? What about freedom? What about sovereignty? What about why is this so bad that these people stood up and reclaimed their freedom and sovereignty? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible.
What's also incredible, Rory, is how some people think in England that not being ruled by a bureaucratic body in Brussels means they're no longer European. Like somehow they have to be given the right to be European from a bloated bureaucracy, and they're willing to join that and not understand the consequences of it. And it seems, that the people who do understand that, they voted to leave. They realize that they can trade with Europe, they can go to Europe. They just don't have to be governed by an unelected body in Brussels.
Exactly. And the important word there is unelected. These are criminals that were put into place to rule over 26, 27 nation states that they have no clue what's going on in these people's homes, in these people's businesses, in these people's lives. They have no clue. They have no concept of what's going on there at all. And they don't care, quite frankly.
And the people who are doing it are getting paid enormous sums of money.
Enormous.
Benefits, salaries, and most of them, as you're probably aware, Rory, are former politicians from the member states. So it's kind of the place where they get to go. Either they go to be a lobbyist, they go to be someone on television giving commentary for a lot of money or giving speeches, or they go to Brussels and work as a bureaucrat and make a few $100,000 and have their families they have their families moved over. Yep. They have a cost of living adjustment. They have private services. So of course they're in favor of the EU.
And let's not forget that they also have armed guards.
Though they're against guns.
Not guards that are carrying words. They're carrying guns.
It's good for them, but nobody else.
Oh yeah.
They need protection because they're so important.
Right. Their lives are much more important than you.
Well, of course, they're ruling over you. What would you do without them?
I mean, we're just the pigs in the slop. They're the gatekeeper.
There you go.
Oh my God!
Well, people have been conditioned, though, to look up to somebody to fix things for them, and that's why they don't have the capacity. They have the capacity, but that's why they don't actually see what's going on. They've lost their innate ability to see things for themselves. I like the expression, a dog knows the difference between being stepped on and kicked. Some of these people don't know the difference. They've lost that natural ability.
Well, what's
Oh,
going on with the metals, my friend? What's
all
happening?
right.
What's
Well,
happening there?
there's a big shift here. You and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and just about any commentator has noted over the past several years, gold moving west to east. That's
Yep.
been a big trend. Everyone talks about it. Everyone's noticed it, and that's shifted now.
Yes.
Because in 2015, got the teleprompter up here, Rory. In 2015, it was record demand in these. Russia made a lot of news. They added 208 tons of gold to their reserves, the Central Bank of Russia. China popped on another that we know about, 150 tons, the People's Bank of China, when they started reporting in last year in the middle of the year. The Shanghai Gold Exchange had a record year, 2,600 tons withdrawn from the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and India had over 900 tons. Okay, so you had a massive year last year, and I kind of equate that to buying insurance. The price was low. The time to buy insurance is before the disaster happens. And they were buying hand over fist because the price, as everyone knows, was $1,900 in 2011, and it was just over $1,000 for most of 2015. Well, insurance is on sale. You buy it. Kennedy said famously, the time you fix the roof is when the sun is shining. You don't buy your insurance when the disaster has already happened. And we're seeing that now. So now what's happened is Russia kind of slowed its purchases this year. They're not on the same pace as last year. They only added 3 tons of gold in May. The People's Bank of China, Rory, added no gold in May. And they had been adding 10, 15, 20 tons a month officially into the People's Bank of China. The Shanghai Gold Exchange through May is down 15%. Last year they had withdrawn almost 1,000 tons. And this year through May, they've only delivered 835. So you've got it's still at elevated levels, but there is a decline. They're not buying as much. Now, India is the real story here. They're down over 50% year over year. They've only delivered less than 200 tons through May.
Wow.
Last year, as we mentioned, I think it was 920 tons. In 2011, it was well over 1,000. And March imports were 80% down. Provisional data. Now, what I do is I publish the official final data that I get from Nick Laird at ShareLinks. They publish the official Indian data. But then there's provisional data that comes out. And April was down 74% gold imports. May was down 40%. Now, that's not because demand is necessarily down in India. That's a result of, we've talked about this, that's because of the war on gold over there, where they're taxing gold sales, they're taxing imports on gold. So, but it points out, though, if you combine Russia's slowdown, China's slowdown, and India's slowdown, those were the 2 big central banks, Russia and China, that were buying 80% of the central bank gold. And then India has always been one of the top gold consumers. So you've got this dramatic shift now. And what's happened is in the past few months, London has now imported more gold from Switzerland. Now, the reason they get it from Switzerland is Switzerland doesn't mine gold, but they refine gold. They're some of the 4 or 5 biggest refiners of gold in the world in Switzerland. And normally, most of that gold, as we talked about, goes from west to east. It flows through Switzerland and ends up in China, through Hong Kong, through what's the other one? Shanghai, and goes to India. But in the last 3 months, London has received more gold from Switzerland than Hong Kong, India, and China combined. Now, that's a dramatic shift of the amount of gold. And now, where's it going in London? Well, supposedly it's going, and I believe it does go there. It's going to the vaults for the ETFs. And it's just like the COMEX. I believe that the COMEX gold is there, and everybody sees those numbers that are there, but there's so many owners per ounce. But it doesn't negate the fact that the actual physical gold appears to be flowing from Switzerland into London and then into these vaults where the ETFs represents the shares underlying the ETFs. And last Friday, when Brexit was fully announced Thursday night, Friday morning, there was a $4.3 billion surge in holdings of these gold-backed funds. The GLD added supposedly 18.4 tons of gold into its fund on Friday. And, they supposedly now have about a thousand tons of gold.
They added, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I apologize. But you're saying that, or you just said that the GLD added 18 tons of gold in one day?
Yes. That's what the teleprompter is telling me.
Okay.
Sigh. Did you see that with Hillary Clinton? She said sigh when it showed up on the screen. Yeah, 18. I'm sorry for our listeners. I'm talking too fast. 18.4 metric tons into the GLD fund on Friday alone. And now they have about 1,000 tons. And so you see the gold now is flowing into these ETFs. And who's buying ETFs? Our friends like Soros and Druckenmiller and Paul Singer from Elliott Management. Western investors, institutional investors, don't seem to buy the physical gold as much as they do buying these ETFs, of which GLD is the largest one. So that's where a big portion of the physical gold shift has happened. It's not flowing as much into India because India's kind of choked it off. And by the way, Russia and China, they also buy a lot of their own domestic besides imports. Yep. But the other place that gold is going is into British retail. I don't know if you saw the stories. The British Royal Mint said there's like a 30, 40, 50% increase since the vote. Bullion Vault, which is it's international, but it's based in London, has seen an 85% increase in new accounts over their past 12 months average. They had their busiest day ever on Friday. Sharps Pixley, which has a retail shop in Mayfair in London, sold out. They had to kind of call out to their German affiliate to try to send them some gold. So the gold fever has, moved from east to west, and that's a result of the West catching on to some of the strains in the financial system. And of course, Brexit accelerated that concept. But one thing I noticed, Roy, is I don't see it in the United States yet, not in the US Mint numbers, not in the Canadian, not in the Perth Mint numbers. I don't see any big increase yet. We'll see what they report today at the US Mint. I haven't seen any dramatic increase in gold sales at all. And silver either. I haven't seen. The US Mint is still slow on silver this month. They're about 2 million, and they've been doing about 4 million from January to May. So it could be one of those circumstances where people anticipated crisis and they bought their insurance early, but there doesn't seem to be that follow through, other than in the ETFs and then in Britain. But there doesn't seem to be this follow through this summer in the West, the United States.
Well, in the West, we're constantly told don't buy gold. So
There's counterfeits out there.
Yeah, there's counterfeits. The counterfeits have flooded the market. And this morning I just thought, well, I'm going to go over to Bloomberg and see what kind of nonsense that they're publishing. And lo and behold, dead center homepage of Bloomberg.com. Jim Rogers is buying dollars over gold. And it was like, well, okay, there it is. That's classic. And never mention the fact that he owns a lot of physical gold. Never mention the fact that he's still bullish on gold. Just that he's more bullish on dollars at this exact moment than gold. And he probably is. Because he's a very smart investor.
Gold has gone up dramatically over the past 2 or 3 of all year, while the dollar has declined all year. So if you're just playing the short-term swings, sure, the dollar has a bigger swing. And the thing about the dollar, it will get capped. But the point is, the dollar index was down to 94, 95, and since Brexit, it's gone up to 96, 96.5.
Right. So, and
gold, I don't know if you've noticed, and gold and silver have flatlined since their dramatic increase. I sent something over to the doc, and he published it in Silver Doctor. There's 2 charts just showing how gold and silver have been in a tight range. That's even more astounding for silver because silver is volatile and small. It's been trading at about 1770, 1772 for 8 hours on Friday and most of the day today.
Yep. The high on silver today was 1766. I'm sorry, 1794. So it got up, it stared at 18 in the face, and the low is 1766. And
They
it's
cap it,
currently right around
and then they
1775.
and then they let it ride. It seems.
Yep,
I mean, what they want the story to be is, hey, we had this disaster, and gold and silver really didn't move.
exactly.
That's what they want. Now they're negating the fact that gold rose $100 out of the chute, and they could do nothing about that when
Right.
they announced that the Brexit had actually gone through.
Yep.
And silver too, but it got immediately capped thereafter.
Yep. Yeah, and gold right now it's flat. I mean, and I was talking to Dave earlier today, and Dave Kranzler, and we were talking about the overnight action. I mean, last night on Sunday night when the markets opened, gold was up like somewhere $15, $16, and by this morning it was down to about $10,
Yeah,
and now it's
up $5.
flat.
Yep.
It's just flat. I mean, it's up right now about $2. So, I mean, they are squelching it. They are putting the brakes on gold and silver.
A canary in the coal mine is not allowed to sing.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Put a muzzle on it.
Yep, because as we've talked about, in any example where it looks like the public catches a bid or is interested in gold or silver, it could be a disaster because there's just not enough.
Not
Silver,
enough.
especially if a small percentage of people actually wanted to buy physical. So that's why they love this ETF concept, because they can satisfy people with the price exposure. People don't know any better, and they can actually manage that. Because
because it's just paper. I mean, that's
Right.
just digits on the screen. I mean, that's all that is. There's nothing to that. That plays right into their hand.
Of course, and that's why they were created. Those ETFs, the precious metal ETFs, have only been around for about 10 years.
Yeah, and it's 10 years too many. 10 years too many, my friend.
I agree with that.
What do you see? What's your take, Lewis, on what's happening right now as far as the Brexit, and more importantly, the situation with these other nation states stepping up and saying, well, we want out. Sweden, Italy, and France in particular, those three were immediately out saying, we're bringing a referendum to the table. And now I think there's been 3 or 4 more that have stepped up and said, yeah, we're bringing a referendum to the table as well.
Well, and there was also the Dutch were interested. All of the countries have healthy Eurosceptic majorities or substantial minorities in them. Italy, France, Sweden, Belgium, Poland, Germany, Spain, Hungary. And it only takes, this is monkey see, monkey do. If Britain gets away with it, then the rest of them will. So what I see happening is, I saw a thing this morning how they're talking about the remaining members have to form a deeper union. So this kind of reaction is saying, that's the worst thing, that the people that are Eurosceptic, they want, if they want to stay, they don't want a deeper union, they want a lesser union.
Yeah.
And these guys want to make sure they're going to try to make an example out of the UK. If you think about all the stories, it's about how this is a disaster for the pound. And my view is there's always going to be in England, and there'll always be a pound if England chooses to have one. But I can't see the same thing about the European Union and the euro. But yet they've managed to make the pound out to be the weak entity that has no future, when the pound has been around hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years as a currency. But the euro's only been around, as a decade, really, 15, 20 years, since the early 90s. So I actually view this as the European Union now is going to try to make an example out of England. And they're also instructing all the prime ministers of the countries are warning their people not to do it. I know there was one, the Danish prime minister made a statement a couple of weeks before the Brexit vote. the Dutch prime minister. They like to say things kind of as just like they warned England. Don't do it. Don't do it. Obama went over to England and said, "Don't do
Yes.
it. We're going to punish you." And that's basically what's happening. I don't think they realize that actually makes people even more annoyed.
Yes.
I
That's
mean, the
that's
one
what
thing
they
they
don't
have is the
get.
vote.
That's what they don't. That's what seems to be eluding these maniacs that are trying to run the show, is that every time that they open their mouth, and I go back to when they paraded Mitt Romney out a few months ago, and Mitt Romney came out and said, you better not vote for Trump, and you better vote for who we tell you to vote for. I mean, that was his basic message,
They're
and
like,
it
"Who
was
are
and it
you?
was a
You
huge.
lost."
What's that?
Like people are like, "Who are you? You lost. You have
Right,
no authority. You have no even moral authority or insight to tell us who we should vote for.
and that's
Why
when.
listen to the guy?
Yeah, I mean,
It's
and
offensive."
that's what happens. I mean, especially when you bring somebody who is so well respected around the world, like Obama, and you bring him to the neighborhood, and he tells you how you're supposed to act and think and do.
Well,
I
he
mean,
threatened. He said, "We'll put you at the back of the line." Like, what?
back of what line?
Oh, we're not getting the United States not going to do us any favors anymore. It's basically what he was trying to tell them.
Well, I understand that, but we aren't doing him any favors now. Is my point. I mean, yeah, we're you think you're enslaved now by us? Just wait. Think that noose is tight now. If you vote Brexit, then you'll see tightening.
Well, what will be interesting, though, Rory, is if indeed Donald Trump wins and this Boris guy wins the Prime Minister of England, all this talk about banning Trump from England, and it'll be an entirely different ballgame. I mean, because you'll have somebody that they're both be in favor of each other, but on different terms. The UK and the US will have a different type of alliance. It won't be based on trying to squash nationalism. They'll both be anti-immigration type parties that would be in charge of their respective countries, where now it's the reverse. And I guess they were thinking is that England would hang on the way they were, and if Trump got in, they would ban Donald Trump. Well, if this Boris Johnson guy gets in, there's going to be no banning of Donald Trump. I think you're going to see Donald Trump over at those golf courses a lot more in the UK.
Well,
And
I
you're going to be seeing Boris Johnson in the US more.
I still think that and it pains me to say, but Hillary Clinton will be the next person to occupy the White House. I still see that as being the outcome come November. And I mean, like I said, I don't like it, but you know, it's
It's a function of control.
exactly, that is exactly right.
And the fact that she's even in the running and that she's even leading in polls shows you still the remnant power of the establishment and the mainstream media.
The fact that she is walking around a
Yes,
free
free.
person and not, at least at the very minimum, in front of Congress being
Yep.
investigated 6 ways to Sunday,
Yep.
realistically investigated, not this, dog and pony show or kangaroo court. I'm talking about a real investigation.
And concurrent with that, every media outlet calling for her to drop out.
Yes, which they
You don't
should
see
be.
that. Well, they're not.
Instead of
And,
singing her praises about how
and
great and how qualified, quote, how qualified she is. Yeah, she's highly qualified. As for acts of treason, she's highly qualified.
it is unbelievable. If there wasn't there for the internet, though, this Brexit vote never would have passed because you had both parties in England, all the mainstream media, all over the world saying that this had to happen. They had to remain. That Brexit was a bad thing. It would result in disaster. And the only reason it passed is because there is somewhat of a free internet. That were able to disseminate information and counter that mainstream media. And that's why they want to shut it down.
Yes,
Because they can't dictate the narrative as much as they would like.
that is correct. I mean, there were a couple of reports that I heard that came out just prior to the Brexit, where people were passing information around through social media and various other internet forums about how people needed to take a pen to the vote to cast their vote because they were issuing pencils at the polling stations. Now, Think about that. You're going to be issued a pencil with an eraser at a national vote. That could be a problem.
Yeah. And then
But
there's the digital voting too, that they can just,
yeah,
change if they wish. The
yeah. I mean,
Diebold, whatever they're
yeah,
called.
Diebold. I mean, which the Diebold brothers were both convicted of fraud, and one of them, I believe, or both of them were convicted of racketeering. I mean, but yet they have the machines, the voting machines that we use here in this country.
For voting racketeering.
I mean, does that not seem like something is wrong to you?
But
I mean,
very
the
few people
people
know
that
about it. That's what the problem is, really.
right, and it's just unfortunate, but gold and silver still looking, even though they're being held in this very very tight trading range. I still believe that they are where people should be, and I believe that that's where people are headed, and I believe that the numbers will bear that out. And
It's going to have to be this time a controlled increase as opposed to a controlled demolition we've seen over the past 5 years.
yeah, managed retreat is the way that I've heard it described.
Yeah, managed retreat. This will be a managed increase. There's probably a better term for it, but you get the point that the price will rise, but it's not going to go up $100 a day.
Not yet. I see that coming.
Once it goes up $100 a day, it means they're out of control. They don't have the ability to control it. But right now, it looks like it went up $100 a day and it got capped right in its tracks.
Yep. But there's going to come a day.
Oh, absolutely.
That won't happen. It won't be able to happen.
I think especially for silver.
Especially for silver, yes, I would agree with that. That because there's just so little of it, and
exactly.
what
so
little bit there is.
Small, and there's very little silver, and there's that industrial demand.
Industrial. That's what I. Yep, that's where I was headed. I mean, what is being mined is basically being used in industrial man. I mean, and that's one of the things that we've pointed out on a couple of different occasions, Lewis, is that your research has shown that about 50% now of the silver demand is going for investment, whereas that is a gargantuan change from what it was, as few as 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they need to quash investment demand, so there's still silver for the industry, that they don't start complaining or going outside the market and paying the higher price.
Or buying mines. Just go buy a mine.
Yeah, or calling up Keith Newmeyer and buying directly.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, if they can buy directly from the mines, the miners set their own price. You maybe use COMEX as a benchmark, but if they want to make sure that a manufacturer gets their supply, they could charge a premium.
Right.
And if that's known that they're charging a premium, then another manufacturer may go to another mine or the First Majestic and be willing to pay that premium just to make sure they have their supply. It can work the other way. They can get a discount, but I would think if things are tight, a premium would be involved.
Well, I mean, and as we've shown also, that there seems to be not only a consolidation within the mining industry at the company level, but there seems to be a consolidation happening at the country level or the regional level as well. I mean, there's not as many places that are mining silver at this point on the planet. So when you have fewer options, how can the price go down? It can't.
Well, makes sense to me, Rory. I wish you were in charge of pricing. I kind of argue with you.
Oh, well, yeah. Unfortunately, we're just using logic instead of manipulated numbers.
Which, you have to do. I think it's unfortunate, but you have to take into account. You can't say, well, my prediction would have been right if there wasn't manipulation, but we're all aware of manipulation. We know the forms that it takes. So you kind of have to factor that. It's just like the weather. You have to factor in the weather when you make these projections. Economists say, oh, the number was off in May. It was bad weather. It's like when you made your projection, you knew what the weather was in May when you made it in June. So it's the same with us. We have to kind of realize that manipulation has to be factored into our projections.
And if you don't, then
Sure.
you'll never even be close.
Because if you do supply and demand, anyone will tell you that silver should be $50 and gold should be well over $2,500. And it just doesn't make any sense that it's not. But that's because, look, there was an article the other day that talked about, and it was in Bloomberg. I can send you the link. It was talking about how countries were buying or selling their own currencies, trying to cap what was going on and making sure no one profited from wild swings in currencies. Okay, I get why they do that. That's admitted manipulation, but somehow they're not doing that to the gold and silver markets. Of course they are. And that's what those charts show, that gold and silver just were flatlined. They didn't reflect if you think about a day after Brexit, there should be so much volatility in both of those markets. Instead, it wasn't. It was almost like a normal ho-hum day. Silver 1772, 1776, 1773. It was like that all day. There's no way that the sentiment on silver was, okay, we'll just relax now and take a look at that price.
Right.
You just had this supposed disaster in England, with the Brexit vote. So, of course, the central banks, they control their own currencies. The plunge protection team is out in the stock markets. They're out in the bond markets. They're out in the currency markets, but some are supposed to believe they're not out in the gold and silver markets. Of course they are.
Of course they are.
And the price action shows the no volatility in the price of gold and silver yesterday and even today.
It's just beyond the pale. That's all I can say. Well, Lewis, is there anything else we should cover, or have we given them enough to chew on for the moment?
I think so. And I just want to congratulate you on your new site, Rory. It's got a very nice, legendary outlook on it. And it's a great resource for people to go check out at the Daily Coin. I love it.
Well, thank you very much for saying so. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I want to thank everybody that has stuck with me through all these changes and everything, and the past few weeks in particular. And we haven't really gotten it going yet. I mean,
we're looking forward to that. I mean, it's great right now.
Well, give it a couple more weeks, and Colin, the guy that's working on it in the background, that dude he's very smart and he knows what he's doing, and he's whipping me into shape also. So it'll be, the functionality is going to explode within the next few weeks, and the interactions that'll be that you guys out there in the audience that you'll be able to enjoy are going to be mind-boggling, in all honesty. So, but just give me a little bit longer to get these things worked out. But thank you very much for mentioning that, Lewis. I really appreciate it.
Great, well done, Rory, and Colin as well.
Yes, big shout out to him. And I guess we'll pick this up in a couple of weeks, and just let everybody know I'm trying to get things worked out to where I can get Lewis Cammarosano, who we've been speaking with from Small Gold, and that's SMAULGLD.com. I'm trying to get everything coordinated to where I can get Lewis and Dave Kranzler from Investment Research Dynamics and my co-host on Shadow of Truth, to where we can do a roundtable on what's happening. And as soon as everything kind of settles down with the Brexit, then we're going to make that happen. So just be on the lookout for that.
All right. Excellent.
So, well, all right, Lewis, I certainly appreciate all the time, all the wisdom, all the knowledge. We'll pick it up in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks, everyone.